So I'd love to start by just hearing your personal journey with anxiety and how you got into this as a topic of interest and became such an influencer in the space.
The truth is that I got into this anxiety world based on the decades of anxiety that manifested in my own life. Many times, when I look at influencers today, what they're in and where they are right now, they've gone through a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, that sort of thing, and they've asked themselves the question of, how can I make a difference in the world? And well, we've got a lot of education and a lot of experience with anxiety. That's what I was thinking. So I said, you know what, why don't we be the anxiety guy? And I actually changed my name from the anxious athlete. A lot of people don't know that, to the anxiety guy, because I don't think the anxious athlete would be doing as well as the anxiety guy today. But but again, years of heartache, man, lots and lots of pressure. I used to be a tennis professional, and I was the only way that I was shown the real love that I craved as a child. The only way that I was listened to, the only way that I felt like I belonged in the world was when I succeeded in some way, and that succeeding came from the expectations of my own parents, mainly my dad, but also my coaches and that sort of thing. So yeah, there was plenty of anxiety, and I said, you know what, I've got tons of experience with this. Let's go and help the world with anxiety.
Yeah, that's great. So it started as a personal issue, and you had to work through this yourself, obviously, and then and now are sharing your own tips. So what did you learn along that journey? What made you want to share your own advice with people, or what maybe wasn't
Yeah.
working for you, and what helped you through it?
Yeah, it was a really up and down struggle. There was if I look back on my anxiety, I can tell that I really went through different forms of struggling. There was a big part of it was social anxiety, and then there was a lot of OCD, and then there was a lot of general anxiety, and then it transferred into health anxiety. And the truth is that I believe in my heart, and having worked with many people for the last 6, 7, 8 years, that there are these subconscious programs that are really installed, either consciously installed or unconsciously installed by other people. And these subconscious programs, I feel, are the very roots of the problem. Because what I was doing was I was doing all the right things. And a lot of anxiety sufferers today, they do all the right things. And yet they're still thoroughly disappointed with the outcome. Dennis, I'm meditating. Dennis, I'm doing CBT. Dennis, I'm exercising. I'm taking these supplements. I'm doing everything in my power. Why am I not feeling any better? And so, in my heart, I believe that there is, with great intention, there's a lot of great people out there that are trying to help other people with anxiety. But again, it's a very surface level strategy that they apply. And the problem is that they don't get to the root cause of the issue. And to me, the root causes come down to the subconscious programs related to self punishment. So, self punishment meaning life has to be a struggle. You'll never, achieve XYZ because your label is this, or as well, you're inferior. This is another subconscious program I see all the time. If someone feels inferior constantly, and that's been, hung up on them as they were a child and growing up, and they felt the sense of being inferior to other people. When they go about trying to change their sensitivity levels and anxiety, what do you think they're going to go through? They're going to say, "I'm inferior to change." So I will take 2 steps forward, but then I'll always revert back and take 4 steps back because I am inferior. I don't deserve this change. So you'll see that the programs related to self punishment, programs related to inferiority, programs related to perfectionism, these types of programs are the very things that need to be uninstalled. And then, since the universe doesn't like a void, there needs to be an installing of something new. And there are ways to do that.
Yeah, see, this is what I love about your message is that you really get at the root cause of the problem. And I think that's such an issue in probably in healthcare in general, but especially in mental health, is that oftentimes the surface level is treated, but you're not actually getting at the very root cause of the problem. And the way that I've started to think about the mind, and this is also just through observing the mind through meditation, is there's kind of two programs running on it. The first program, and these programs create your subconscious, a lot of your subconscious thinking. The first program being your evolved psychology, which is kind of innate, pre-downloaded. It tells us to be afraid of the dark. It tells us how we should be predisposed towards learning languages and all the things that we come innately wired with as a baby. And then there's program B, what I call program B, which is our conditioning and behaviorism, which is more
Mm.
the beliefs that get wired into us by, say, our parents. So in your case, it sounds like maybe there was a lot of pressure in the sports realm to in a belief system that was created around you have to, this is what success looks like. And so the process of digging into the subconscious is getting at both of those programs, A and B. And if you want to call program C is kind of which our ability to consciously reprogram, which using
Mhm.
meditation, CBT, and other methods, and kind of rewire our brain, because it does have all this buggy software that's running on it. It
Mhm.
makes us kind of have a negativity bias and see the world in a more negative way because of how our environment, our ancestors were interacting with.
Totally. Totally. It's a great way to look at it. Absolutely.
So how do you, when you're thinking about digging into the subconscious and getting people to rewire their beliefs, this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about too in meditation. How do you get someone to change their beliefs? Because that's such a tricky business.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people aren't really aware of their beliefs. There are 2 sets of beliefs, in my opinion. One is the conscious beliefs, like I believe I can make $1 million a year, or I believe, there's a lot of motivation, rah out there that says, believe in yourself and shoot for your dreams and that sort of stuff. And people have this conscious belief, like I can. But then there's a second set of beliefs, in the subconscious that says, you're not good enough, you don't have the skills, you'll never maintain it. Life is supposed to be punishing, or whatever it is. So there's 2 sets of beliefs. I truly believe that the missing pieces of information within, whether that's an anxiety sufferer or anybody who's struggling, has to come out. The missing pieces of information, because if you ask most people, where do you believe that the anxiety snowball began? Let's go with anxiety. They'll go, really don't know where it began. I consciously can't remember the moment and when this occurred. Because the truth is that it's been stuffed aside so much, it's been massaged so much. There's been so many things added. It's been repressed at such a deep level that to have conscious access to it is almost impossible. So, like you mentioned, the things that bring out that information are the things, in my opinion, like exercising, like meditation, like nature. These are the sorts of things that bring out the missing pieces of information. They bring out the core beliefs. They allow the person to tap into the repressed emotion, the energetic blockages within them, to say, you know what? Here's where I need to do my digging. Here's where the root cause of all of this lies. But the problem there is that a lot of people think that the nature time and the exercising and the meditations and the supplements, these are things that are going to take away the anxiety. And nothing could be farther than the truth. And the truth is that we see this in their results constantly. Um, People will come to me, like I mentioned, I'm doing all the right things. Why is this not going away? Because you haven't renegotiated the emotional traumas that you're continuing to carry with you today, that you are stuffing deeper and deeper inside within you. There hasn't been a renegotiating of them. You're still carrying around the guilt of what happened. You're still blaming mom, dad, whoever for what you're feeling today. You haven't forgiven people that you need to forgive. You're still living in fear, and there still isn't true and natural love in your heart in order to be able to see the world in the right way. So to be able to tap into the subconscious mind, like you mentioned, there has to be this inner peace. There has to be this silence. There has to be the courage and the intention to move towards a place of unfamiliarity. Um, and you'll notice with anxiety sufferers today, they have a very difficult time slowing down. They have a very difficult time meditating. It's to sit with yourself and your sensations, your symptoms, and your thoughts for a short amount of time. Let's say 2 minutes feels like 2 hours for an anxiety sufferer because it's so foreign. Right? I'm used to going. I'm used to stimulation. I'm used to stuffing things aside. And so I believe that, in the world that we're living in today, we are so much more stimulated and using up so much more inner resources than we are aware of. There's so much stress in the world, and the collective um, energies of human beings today are basically transferring over to the next human and the next human. We're not aware of the invisible frequencies that are out there that are affecting us. And so we're always in this limbo of, taking a couple steps forward and then reverting right back to where we are, because we really haven't revealed the missing pieces of information. Because to a lot of people, it scares them. It's scary to dig that deep. And so I've been mentored by certain people that have dug very, very deep as far as repressed emotions go. And it's incredible that not only can anxiety disorders be healed in quite a quick fashion if we do the right work and be able to communicate with the subconscious, but not only that, but also physical illnesses can also really be eliminated with this kind of work. But that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, my friend.
No, that's great, and there's a lot there that I want to unpack. One thing that I just kind of latched onto in particular is you were starting to get at kind of one of the root causes of the root cause, which is our technology. I guess you might call it a distraction crisis that we're living in. If one of the main themes of your answer there was introspection and looking inside, doing the hard work of actually figuring out who you are and how your mind operates, technology is not only stressing us out, but distracting us to the point where we're less likely to look inward because we can pull out our phone at any free minute on the toilet when you'd normally be alone with your thoughts or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
We're addicted to the phones. Absolutely. And 5G's coming around, and that's a whole new conversation. That's a whole new beast right there.
yeah. So, what are some of the ways that you think technology is impacting us specifically, and what would be some advice or tips you would have for people to start to kind of unwire themselves?
Yeah, and I mean, in the ways of trying to counter these invisible frequencies, and whether that be through other humans, energy vampires, let's call them. And people don't need to say anything to anybody these days to affect another human being. You know, the vibrations, the frequencies, the energies of one human being affects another. Now, through the works of heartmath.org, we're recognizing how these energy fields are affecting other people. So that's one. When it comes to things such as Wi-Fi and upcoming 5G and these sorts of invisible frequencies, I'm a big believer that it affects us a lot more than what we're told. I believe deep down, and this is a whole nother a conversation that can go on for hours. I believe that there's a deeper agenda to all this that doesn't need to be unpacked today because it can't in such a short time. But um, there are ways that I believe we can protect ourselves not only from these invisible frequencies such as Wi-Fi, but also from the energy vampires. Number one is just simply to get back to a place where we're sheep-like, less sheep-like, and we begin to question what isn't being questioned. I think that if you look all the way down the line around society today, there's a certain amount of awakening that's happening. People are actually tapping into their conscious resources a lot more. I believe this is a really good thing because we're no longer being a victim to the marketing, the advertising, the things that we're told we need to do, the things that we're told we need to be, the way life needs to be. I feel like people are beginning to question some of those things, and that's great. So there is an awakening going on there. To protect yourself from things such as Wi-Fi, there are some really steps that you can take to be less affected. For example, turn your Wi-Fi off at night. Okay, because it's been proven that these invisible frequencies affect a human being a lot more at night than they do throughout the day. Don't ask me why; I'm not really sure, but that's just one of the facts that I've heard. As well, keeping your modem uh, as far away from you as possible would be another one. So there are practical ways that we can start to be less affected by this. But when it comes to the frequencies of other human beings, for example, this is something that is really interesting to me because a lot of people blame themselves for the feelings that they feel and the mood swings that they're under all the time, when in fact, um, these invisible energies could very well be affecting you in the way that you don't really recognize. So again, it comes down to awareness, it comes down to consciousness, it comes down to your ability to counter any irrational, any limiting, any negative, pessimistic way of seeing something with another way. Now we're talking, real basic CBT type stuff where you're countering limiting ideas about things with new perspectives. Um, and along that road, I would really emphasize a certain amount of balance as a person's going through the day. If you are around work environments where there's a lot of people go and this may be affecting you in a negative way, you've got to find time to be able to get away from the things that are man-made and into a place where it is a lot more naturistic, where you're not bombarded by visuals, because the farther you see, the more your eyes relax and the more your nervous system does relax. So you want to be in settings where you can see things at a distance, the mountains, whatever it may be, and you're recharging in this way. You want to get away from the noise, all this noise pollution, whether it be other people's conversations or music in the background. No matter what's going on, it's affecting you, and it's programming you to a large extent. Nowadays people are eating food and they're not really tasting their food, or they're not really smelling their food. This isn't our natural way of being. So these are all things that begin with awareness. To, in this moment, in this present moment, where does my focus need to go? What do I really need to pay attention to? How can I stop prioritizing other people and really start prioritizing myself? Um, because I want to be on this planet for as long as I possibly can. I want to make a lasting difference in my own life and other people's lives. And the only way that I can do that is if I stop falling victim to what other people think and what other people expect from me, and start to really ask myself the question of, what do I need? A lot of people don't take the time to ask themselves that question. Specifically when it comes to symptoms, for example, symptoms of anxiety. Symptoms are signals, symptoms are messages. So what's the message? Is the message that, there's a certain trauma that is still playing out in your mind? Are you unconscious of it? Are you conscious of it? Do you need to renegotiate this trauma? Do you need to reframe it? Are you fatigued? Are you depleted? Do you need a vacation? Do you need to get away from certain people? Do you need a career change? What is your body telling you? A lot of people don't take the time to answer that question. I think it's vital, rather than being reactive, rather than being catastrophic, rather than internalizing and saying, my life is just crap and I'm just going to suffer and punish myself for the rest of my life. Why don't we take the time to really dig deep and answer that question? So again, um, those are some of the things that I believe are causing grief, anxiety, distress, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there, and obviously, because there's no simple answer to the mind. It's so complex, and we're interacting with the environment in a lot of novel and complicated ways. I think some of which we don't even know how it's impacting our minds. But a couple of the themes that you got at there, that I wanted to maybe dive a little deeper into. One was just the way that we're interacting with an environment that's so different from the one that we evolved in. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not as often in nature. We're not looking at landscapes. We're not, we're not in this tribal setting. We're not hunting and gathering our food. And so that program A that I talked about is largely getting neglected a little bit, it seems like, in a lot of ways.
Right. Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, setting wise, absolutely. I was in Vancouver a couple weeks ago, and man, it's like every little space now needs some concrete. It's like, ooh, we got a little bit of we got a couple bushes over here. Ain't that nice? And you'll see, I'll go around, I'll be smelling these bushes. As just a quarter of a block of bushes. My God, like, where your system is just like, please get me in a place where it's less stimulating. Get me in a place where I really belong, and there's a lot of information that comes to the forefront when you are in these naturistic places, but they're hard to find, man. They're hard to find. They're really hard to find. Whether you, okay, let's say that you are in a location where it is naturistic, you might be bombarded auditorily, right? Auditory. There might be sound, there might be construction in the background. All of a sudden, your system isn't as relaxed as it can be. So to find these environments is absolutely crucial, like you just mentioned. And I think people need to spend a lot more time in those places to learn about who they truly are and tap into this divine intelligence within them that lives but is being neglected, that is being ignored.
Yeah, and I'm really jealous of your current setup in Bali, because the happiest that I've ever been in my, in recent memory was when I was doing my meditation teacher training in Ubud in Bali. And if I think
Right.
about the factors that were contributing, what I think would be contributing to my happiness there, great group of like-minded, encouraging people, sun, nature. We were in the middle of the jungle. We were eating really healthy food that was all fresh and sourced locally, and
Right.
and we were exercising every day with yoga and meditation.
Right.
And so there were so many factors there, but those are clearly, some combination of those ingredients, which in a lot of ways that mimicked like how our ancestors were for 99% of our hominid evolution,
Right.
getting a lot of sunlight, being in a tribe where you feel like you're really have a sense of belonging. And but I think it can be really
Right.
difficult to, as you said, you went to Vancouver and there's cement everywhere. So it's like, how do we find those environments in a modern city and in modern life where it can be so hectic?
Right. It's possible. I mean, there are these hiking trails, and there's beautiful, trees around you and stuff. There it is that, but it is a bit of a distance away and that sort of thing. But again, it is possible to visit those environments from time to time and get back to the real you. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing that you mentioned earlier is just how our beliefs are being programmed, not only by, I guess, just media in a lot of ways, but also the people we're spending times with,
Hmm.
spending time with that we're around. So
Hmm.
this was actually a really tough part for me, was like, realizing that a lot of just how many negative thoughts can come from spending time with a negative person. And
Hmm.
even listening to a song, I don't think we realize often songs are programming our subconscious too, right? Like
Oh
you're
yeah.
listening if you listen to a rap song about how you need to make money in order to be happy, and need to have
Right.
three beautiful women, that's programming your subconscious desires too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because when people think about their thoughts, they believe that their thoughts are coming from them. They believe that they are their thoughts. My identity, my persona is what I think. Well, not necessarily, because you're taking in information all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. And like you mentioned, if you think about one 4-minute song, in the chorus of that song, how many times is that chorus repeated? And what is being repeated? If you think about um, tribes back in the day, let's talk about the shamans. There were certain ways that they got into certain trances and they were able to heal themselves and heal their community. um, one of those ways was through affirmations or incantations or whatever you want to call them, and they just basically repeated the same thing over and over again while they were in a state of trance. And so if I'm listening to 4 minute song, I want to make sure that I know the lyrics of that song and they are positive, but also in the background, I'll do some research and find out what frequencies are running off of that song. Because that I've heard, I cannot I can't pinpoint whether it's true or not, but a lot of the top 40 songs today they're using the same frequencies as they did in Nazi concentration camps back in the day to numb the minds and the brains of the Jews. I mean, I was like, wow, really? That's crazy. So I can't say whether that's true or not, but again, the idea is to be conscious. The idea is to be aware of where you're getting your information, what information are you getting, and how it's really affecting you. Um, People need to understand that a thought is just a thought. You're getting over 70,000 thoughts per day, and a lot of those, most of those thoughts are um, are somebody else's. Most of those thoughts that you're thinking are coming from information that you weren't aware of. So, what you want to make sure you do as you're going through the day is to constantly question the thoughts that you believe will only lead you further away from your true inner voice, your true self. And I took months and months to simply question all my thoughts. I was so in my head in the right way that I was losing out on conversation with other people just because a thought would show up and an emotion would follow. And I would go, you know what? How much of this emotion is coming from me? How much of this thought is coming from me? And how much of it was something that was ingrained into me, embedded into me when I was a child? So there was a lot of digging. There was a lot of recognition of whether these belief systems were mine or whether they were just things that were, embedded into me over the years. And I found that I could actually allow myself to create new belief systems. Neuroplasticity gives us the ability to change the neural wiring in our brain. So, why are we not taking more time to invest in ourselves, to question where we are, to question how we got here, to question the thoughts that show up, to question the feelings that show up? You know, but we live in a world that is so reactive, because we are in fact programmed to be reactive. It's the most efficient way to be. The brain doesn't want to relearn things. The brain it believes that whatever is installed in you is the calling. Whether it is self-punishment, whether it is this belief or that belief, it wants to maintain those things because it believes it's a part of your survival. It believes that this is who you are and this is what's kept you alive for so long. But um, but if you look at the results in your life, and people need to just stop for a brief couple moments and look at where you are in your life and really question how you got here. Question what beliefs are spurring this on, because I can tell you from firsthand knowledge things like um, vision boards. And I made a vision board, and it's a hokey pokey kind of thing, but I made a vision board and I said, oh, we'll give it a shot. 80% of what I put on that vision board came true in the last 2 years. Prior to that, my entire life was struggle. My entire life was punishment. Go and explain that. So I really understood that the subconscious mind, one of the ways subconscious mind learns is through visual imagery, whether that be external or whether that be internal. So that's very, very powerful. But um, yeah, people need to really question their results, and people need to get fed up with where they are. People need to be dissatisfied with where they are. There can't be this back and forth game where, I'll kind of step out of my comfort zone a little bit, but I need to make sure that, these sort of things, these familiar things are still in my life. No, there's got to be a complete dissatisfaction with where you are if you want change to happen. And you have to recognize how much resistance is going to show up when you decide to change. People aren't going to like it. A lot of people are going to go against the change work. And this is a big reason why a lot of people don't change. I might lose my relationships. People might view me differently. People might judge me harshly, whatever it may be. So they don't change. Um, and so there's a lot of investment that comes with change work. And I believe that the investment, whether it be time, whether it be money, whether it be new friendships, whether it be sacrificing relationships, whatever it may be, is worth it in the end. It's worth it in the end because you get to see the true you come out. You get to see a non-distorted viewpoint of the world. You get to tap into different dimensions that you really don't get to tap into when you are in a very reflexive behavioral cycle as you're going through the day. So change is worth it. But if you're going to change, you better get ready to jump into that freezing cold lake of water and to swim and to swim and to swim until your body adapts to the temperature of the water and gets comfortable there. It's got to happen.
Yeah, I've come to realize that for a lot of people, it needs to be more painful to stay the same than to change in order for them to actually make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, it doesn't need to be that way for everyone. I think people can definitely make that cold plunge before it gets too painful. But it's like most alcoholics need to hit rock bottom before they uh, commit to some kind of recovery program. And
Right.
it's like you said earlier, your brain is wired to not have to relearn, and it's just
Right.
more energy efficient. It's already using 20% of your energy. So if you had to relearn a tennis stroke every time you picked up the racket, it would be pretty
Whew.
pretty inefficient.
Pain in the ass.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then back to what you were saying earlier about just this programming and how symbols can program your mind. I mean, that's Freud and Jung just wrote whole books about this. How, and I think it's not paid attention to enough in the modern world because people say it's a little bit unscientific, and it's hard to study these things scientifically, but it's pretty clear that your subconscious mind responds to symbols and symbols in the sense that imagery and visualization, like you were talking about with the vision board, and having a clear goal of where you're headed. I think
Right.
that's the value. Whether you believe in the law of attraction or whatnot. For me, what makes the most sense logically is that having, because I've done this too, and it's amazing how much of it can come true when you put a vision. It's almost like you're putting a little flag out in the future, out in the horizon.
Right.
You're sailing towards something. So even if you tack a bunch of times, you're more likely to
Right.
head for that flag because it's out there. I think a lot
Right.
of people live their life without any idea of where they're headed. So you're reactive, and there's no pivoting going on. There's no real
That's a
sense
great point. That's a huge point.
of yeah, and actually, another thing, that's I'm all over the place. I'm trying to respond to a couple of different things you said in your answer, but also the idea of just being careful what information you're consuming. Because another thing I didn't mention about my time in Bali is that I actually shut down the phone for a full month. Wasn't consuming any news.
Wow.
Actually, stopped reading books. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. And when I got back on the
You
phone,
survived.
I
Uh,
survived, and when I got back on the
right.
phone, I asked my brother. I said, "Hey, what did I miss the last month? Like, what's been going on in the world? Like, did
Right.
California like fall into the ocean?" And he said, I can't think of a single news story that's happened because what you realize is a lot of the news cycle is these rapid kind of quick. They're trying to get your attention, but it's not an
Yep.
actual deep story. It's just all right. We'll
Right.
forget about it the next day.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that idea of kind
Yeah.
of a low information diet, like being careful what you
Right.
actually pay attention to.
Right. So not a whole lot changed
Yeah,
in the month in the outside.
yeah, and yet if you're consuming the news every day, you might think the world's just about to fall apart,
Right.
right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's something that I really have to do. I have to diet from my mobile phone in the near future because I've been spending a lot of time on it, and I can really, I can tell how easy it can be to jump from one thing to the other. Especially you got Twitter and you got Facebook, you got Instagram, you got YouTube, you got all these things, and really they're in the end, yes, they're educative, yes, they inform us with skill building and this sort of stuff and what we need to know, but at the same time it really takes away from who we're meant to be, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's gotten real dark in here. Just give me one sec. It's
It's all good.
a little bit better. Um, yeah, so I like to finish most of these episodes just by asking any parting tips that you would have for people who are trying to directly implement some kind of change in their life in terms of improving their mental health, decreasing anxiety, or whatever it is.
Sure. um you know, I believe that when you're doing change work, it's gotta there's two main components that really need to be affected positively. One, we're talking about communicating with the subconscious, and two, it's what you're doing through the day consciously. So I'm a big believer that both have to happen. Um, Number one is the subconscious, and I'm talking more so about altered state work. When we're talking about altered state work, we're talking about resting your body, resting your mind, and while you're in that rested place, whether you're working with someone that specializes in such things as um, regression to cause work, that sort of thing, uh, to find out at a deep level, to find out which experiences are still living within you that is causing the inner wounded child to stay wounded. So when you think about symptoms, when you think about sensations in the body, when you think about repetitive and reflexive thoughts, when you think about all these things, we're talking about experiences that may have traumatized us, that are still being um, being kind of being aware of in the present moment. So I would personally start with healing the inner wounded child within. What did the what when you're going through the day and the inner wounded child is speaking, what is it saying through symptoms? What is it saying through thoughts? Is it saying don't go to that environment? Is it saying that the world is a scary place? Is it saying that I'm still upset at mom or dad? Is it saying that the bullies in the school are, were really hard on me, and therefore when I socialize with anybody today, I feel down, I feel, angry, that sort of thing. So what is the inner wounded child within you saying through your body, through your physiology? I would do that kind of work. As far as uh, mild hypnosis, or more extreme versions of hypnosis, I would do NLP, neuro linguistic programming work, to again learn how to communicate with the subconscious, heal the inner wounded child. And when the inner wounded child feels safer in the world, as far as what took place in the past and what's taking place in the present moment, then people will stop living their lives with so much distress. That's number one. Number two is conscious as you're going through the day. Like we talked about, there's got to be specific skill sets that you bring with you as you're going through the day that create a change, a shift in your emotional state. So, what sort of things do I need to change my emotional state? Well, I need certain skill sets to be able to not stop thinking about a certain thought, but I need skill sets to be able to prove to me that I can move towards facts rather than um, assumptions. Assuming the worst is going to happen? No, it's the fact based around the situation. For example, health anxiety sufferers go through their day thinking thoughts around ill health. This symptom's going to lead to this potential catastrophic situation, whatever it may be. So if you don't have the skills to be able to counter those ideas, those thoughts in a very meaningful and emotional way, then what's going to happen is you're going to succumb to the original limiting negative idea, and you're going to move towards what I call the spider web effect, where the one thought will lead to another thought, and you'll get to a place where you are so emotionally in distress that it's difficult to get out of. So as you're going through the day, you need certain skill sets to counter those limiting thoughts with other ideas so that you move towards facts of good health, for example, rather than illusions and assumptions of ill health based around a feeling that you don't like. As well, um, recognize what your body is doing as you're going through the day. If I am in a constant, constricted fight or flight state, then I am in a reactive state, a reactive cycle. I am reacting to this, reacting to that. I'm not giving it any thought. I'm going through my day very much unconscious. So the opposite to that would be to begin activating the parasympathetic system, calming down the system, and watching how fast you do things. And that means, how fast am I eating? Okay, how fast do I need to eat, or how slow do I need to eat in order for me to become more aware of my surroundings, more aware of the taste of this food, the smell of this tea, How slow do I need to go to become more aware of what's going on in my outside world and not so caught up in this catastrophicness of the inside world? So speed plays a big part. Breathing patterns play a big part. And you'll notice that when you do focus on speed, many of the other things start to jump in as well. The breathing patterns start to slow down. My awareness starts to shift. I start to focus on things that promote a more relaxed internal state rather than a hectic state. So speed is your best friend, really is. And and I would really suggest that people recognize where the energy drainers are at the moment, whether that's a certain person or people, whether that be at work, or whether that be a certain habit that a person does each and every morning that just begins the cycle of stress. Like, first 10 minutes, what do most people do? They look at their phones, they check their messages. They are at the mercy of the world rather than prioritizing themselves and saying, what do I need to do in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the day? Because honestly, when you're going from an unconscious place of sleep to a conscious place of awakening, this transition is the most important time of the day. The 15 to 20 minutes of the start of your day really dictates how the rest of the day goes, if you notice, for a lot of people. So how are you spending the first 15 to 20 minutes? And also, how are you spending the last 15 to 20 minutes prior to going to sleep? So these two times of the day really need some more attention, I would say. But those would be a couple of good starting points, Liam, for people going through distress and challenges in their lives right now.
Yeah, well, listen, that's some great advice, and um, nothing you mentioned in there is an easy or quick fix, and that's what I love about it, because that's the hard work that I think needs to be done. Is that self-awareness that leads to awakening, or what I would call getting off of autopilot mode, which is kind of how we're programmed to be most of our day. And
Totally.
so, listen, thanks so much for coming on the Fit Mind podcast. I really appreciate your time and your advice, and I'm sure the listeners do as well.
Grateful to be here, man. Pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this was really fun. And yeah, I'll send you over the edited version. I like to kind of get it down to, at least the audio version that I release, get it down to commute length, but feel free to do whatever you want with the video that I'll send you. And
Sounds good.
yeah, we'll be
Sounds
in
good.
touch.
Awesome, man. Appreciate your time. That was fun.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, enjoy the
And
rest
if you
of
come
your.
to Bali, let me know.
Yeah, I'll definitely hit you up, and I know I'll be there within the next couple of years, if not permanently, at least for a
All right.
vacation. So
Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah,
yeah,
take the leap. I'm telling you, you won't regret it.
yeah. I don't think I would. I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
All
All
right,
right, buddy.
awesome. Well,
Thank you so much.
thanks, Dennis. Really nice to meet you.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you too. We'll chat soon.
All right, bye now.
Ciao.